And we really didn't know what the future held for Iris. And the thought of this dog being put to sleep on the 1st of January 2024 because we hadn't done right by her and hadn't found her the home was nothing short of sickening. This is the Canine Justice Chronicles, the podcast which gives big love to our big breeds. I'm your host, Ruth Holroyd.
And I'm also your host, Peter O'Brien.
And we are dog enthusiasts, nothing short of.
Sounded like our X Factor introduction. We are Jedward. There was one of them.
Well, we are. We love dogs. And that's why we're spending hours in this studio talking about them. And something which we feel enormously passionate about is responsible dog ownership in its entirety. Because I think there's been a real shift in culture in this country recently where, in my opinion, the fundamentals of responsible dog ownership have laxed quite spectacularly in some cases. And I think it's important that we all regroup and take a moment to re-educate ourselves perhaps and think, actually, am I doing right by my dog? Let's see how we can do even better.
Absolutely. And we are experienced in this field. Back home, we have 2 baubles, so big dog experience. For those of you who are listening that maybe don't know what a bauble is, they're the South African Mastiff, big, strong, powerful breed, but also super loving, super caring, super protective of their pack, and they fit our lifestyle perfectly. On top of that, we've also worked at a dog rescue, focusing specifically on the bigger breeds at the rescue that maybe aren't as polite for the other volunteers getting involved, and they just need a bit more extra guidance along the way to make them a bit more adoptable.
Through telling the stories of some of those rescue dogs that we worked with and rehabbed during our time at the sanctuary, we're going to explore different elements of responsible dog ownership. And also we're going to look at breed-specific legislation as well and discuss perhaps more pragmatic alternatives to that piece of legislation. Breed-specific legislation refers to the 1991 Dangerous Dogs Act, which at the time banned the ownership of 4 breeds. They were the American Pit Bull Terrier, the Japanese Tosa, the Dogo Argentino, and the Fila Brasileiro. The Dangerous Dogs Act ensured that these breeds could no longer be owned without being registered as dangerous dogs. You had to apply for an exemption certificate from the government in order to legally own that dog. They had to follow a series of really quite strict restrictions. So that included being muzzled in public at all times, being on lead in the public at all times, being neutered, and having third-party insurance as well. The idea was that rather than culling all of these dogs, so having a mass euthanasia, they were eventually going to become extinct because these dogs couldn't be bred from, hence the neutering. They could not be rehomed. And equally, if an owner changed address, the government had to be made aware because the dogs had to be accounted for at all times in the eyes of the law. The reason why this is so prevalent for us to talk about at the moment is because a 5th breed has been added to that list of banned breeds, and that's the American XL Bully. I also think it's important to mention that the 5 breeds that are on the banned breed list aren't actually recognised by the UK Kennel Club. Therefore, breed-specific legislation relies on a set of physical criteria in order to type these dogs. So it doesn't matter that you have scientific proof or genetic proof that your dog isn't one of these breeds. If your dog simply looks like one of these breeds, the police are well within their rights to seize and destroy your dog, to use their term. So it's really important that we as owners are aware of the legal responsibility that we have to keep our dogs safe. Lots of the dogs that we're going to talk about in this podcast fall under the category of breed-specific legislation, not just because they may be of type, for example, but also because some of the behaviours that they may exhibit may also lead them to fall under the Dangerous Dogs Act of 1991, largely because they've been let down by their previous owners, and us as a rescue and us as a support team have come in and rehabbed that dog and given them the love and the guidance that they need to succeed. But ultimately, our goal through this podcast is to promote responsible dog ownership and hopefully give people something to think about and maybe take it upon themselves to do a little bit of extra research and reflect on their dog ownership and think, actually, yeah, I'm doing right, I'm doing this well. Or equally, maybe I need to make some changes, have a little mindset change. Not a problem with that at all.
It's all about learning. We're all here to learn and get more knowledge around the whole topic that's become more prevalent within the media in recent years. And we just wanted to provide a bit more clarity on certain things and bring our real life experience of working with big dogs, having big dogs, because it is a real passion of ours. We just want to advocate for big breeds.
We conducted a series of interviews with experts in the field and in the dog world just to provide a little bit more context to what we're talking about and create a bigger picture on canine culture in this country at the moment, and also things like the impact on rescue and what's going on in that world, so that we all have the clearest idea of what the situation is and what stakes are at play at the moment. This episode focuses on Iris, who was an incredible bull breed who was later typed as an XL bully. She was absolutely stunning.
She was one of the dogs that I fell in love with instantly. It was love at first sight, really, when I saw her. Just that gorgeous lilac, almost champagne, velvety coat almost, put together extremely well. She had those piercing, almost icy eyes.
Hence the name.
She was stunning. And to go along with that aesthetic that she had, which was obviously very highly desirable at the time, but her mannerisms and how she conducted herself was just, you couldn't fault her. She was perfect.
She certainly made an enormous impression on us. She wasn't the same as our usual roster of dogs who were perhaps a little bit more of a flight risk, a little bit more reactive, needed a lot of extra love and guidance. She didn't have any of that because she was pretty sound in that respect.
She just had a charm about her. She had some kind of charm and hold over us.
It was pretty intense.
But just such a polite dog as well. Didn't really go with that mean aesthetic that she had going on, because she did have her ears cropped as well.
Iris found herself in rescue because she had been seized from a puppy farm situation where she was being used as a breeding bitch. Now, we reckoned she was about 18 months old when she came to us, and it was quite clear that she'd already had a litter. Who knows what happened to those puppies, frankly, as we didn't see them. But Iris ended up in our care and made an enormous impression on not just us, but the other staff at the rescue, and seeing her conduct herself and be the little madam that she was.
And we knew as soon as we saw her, my jaw dropped, which doesn't happen all too often. She certainly made heads turn. She was very special, and it was clear that she wasn't going to be here for very long. And it just so happened within a matter of weeks, I think it was a couple of other volunteers that worked at the rescue, inquired about taking her home. Young couple living in a rented property, and they inquired with their landlord about getting a dog, who gave it the all clear. And it wasn't until he asked what breed it was that he then decided to up the rent to an extortionate amount of money.
And ultimately that adoption fell through, which was really sad for Iris. But it wasn't the end of the world because she was such a special dog. We weren't anticipating any problems in finding her a nice, lovely, loving, responsible home.
Which is what happened again. It wasn't that long before a couple of potential adopters came along. And this time she did end up going to a family home, essentially, didn't she?
If I'm being perfectly honest with you all, we were a little bit gutted because I think we were still secretly holding out hope that our situation would change and we would have been able to take her home, because at the time we weren't in a position to take on another dog. But she went to her lovely home and we thought, fabulous, that's it, Iris is sorted.
Yeah, happy ending.
How wrong we were. Iris came back to the rescue after probably not even 6 weeks of being in her new home, because her new owners hadn't perhaps taken into consideration the stigma that is attached to owning a bull breed, particularly a bull breed that looks like Iris, who had indeed had her ears cropped. You know, she had those icy eyes that we've talked about. She was a formidable looking dog. And according to the adopters, they'd had a few comments made their way about her being typed as a pit bull, which, as we all know, is a death sentence for dogs.
Which was quite a shock to everyone at the rescue that this was the reason that she was brought back. It was very apparent that the adopters maybe hadn't done their research, didn't know what they were getting themselves in for. The fact that they couldn't tie, the fact that she looked like a pit bull, and it was a shock that she was kind of branded as one by people who didn't know dogs. And again, it just comes back to the whole premise of this podcast of responsible ownership and doing your research before getting a dog. And it was just clear that this family just had no clue what they were getting themselves in for, really. And we can speak from experience of walking the big dogs and having people cross the road and that public perception of these big dogs that we've got. But you do just have to have a bit of a thick skin when it comes to these things. And it's second nature to us now. We don't bat an eyelid at public perception of our dogs. We know what our dogs are. We know how loving they are, how protective they are of their family, and how they do anything for us. And we love them to bits. But clearly not everyone does that level of research required. And this is what happens.
I think it comes down to advocating your dog and your dog's individual needs. And this couple wasn't prepared to do that. So frankly, as far as I'm concerned, I'm glad that Iris came back into rescue because that wasn't the right family for her. And yes, it was so disappointing that she'd just been passed from pillar to post, but we were going to get it right this time. And we were going to make sure that she went to a home that could provide for her and all the stigma that comes with owning a dog just because of the way they look, and make sure that she is living her happiest, healthiest, safest life possible. So we worked with Iris for a few more months after that. We, as I said, just fell more and more in love with this dog. And we actually had some quite serious conversations, didn't we, about trying to make the puzzle pieces fit and think, oh, God, how can we take this dog home? Because we were completely besotted by her.
Not only that, which we were before the ban came into place, but it became an increasingly likely scenario where we really, really pushed to allow our lifestyle to bring her home. Because as soon as the ban came in, it was like tumbleweed for her because no one wanted to be affiliated with XLs. No one knew what the future looked like for them. And with her being branded of type, she went from having lots of interest to no interest. I think this is so September. The ban came in for December. So we had a couple of months to find her the right home and a forever home. It had to be absolutely perfect for the next 10 years.
Because we couldn't get it wrong, because if it did go wrong, Iris would pay for her life, and we're not prepared to do that. We did have a few applications come in, sparsely, but none of them were appropriate. So Iris, all of a sudden, had gone from having countless applications where we were spoilt for choice almost to virtually none. And it was getting very, very tense. And we really didn't know what the future held for Iris. And the thought of this dog being put to sleep on the 1st of January 2024 because we hadn't done right by her and hadn't found her the home was nothing short of sickening. So Iris was in a real pickle. And we did not know what was going to happen. And it begs the question, how does a dog that emotionally sound, that beautiful, found herself in this position at all? So I spoke with Professor Claire Parkinson, who is the co-founder of the Centre for Human Animal Studies at Edge Hill University, to unpack this a little bit and explore the impact of irresponsible breeding.
My name is Professor Claire Parkinson, and my job title is Associate Head of Department and Co-Director of the Centre for Human Animal Studies at Edge Hill University. The issues that we've got are that backyard breeders do not do any kind of health or genetic testing. They don't impose any kind of, if you like, standards in terms of thinking about breeding limits, the age, the number of litters that a dog might have in her lifetime. They have very little care about where those puppies are going to, whether it's an appropriate home. They often are quite happy to do things like sell two siblings at the same time, which can be an absolute nightmare. People don't realize, but just because you buy two sibling puppies, in actual fact, that can be a huge problem later on, because very well known issue that arises from having two siblings growing up together, and you can end up with them fighting and aggression issues between them. Across the board, what you have is people at the moment who are breeding primarily for money. What's happening is we have this huge pipeline at the moment of puppies who are not properly socialized. There's no care that's been taken with them in that very, very early stage in their life. So everything, for a puppy, particularly from about 3 to 16 weeks, that's such an important age where you can do such psychological harm to a puppy during that time if they're not given the right environment. But also, they need the right nutrition, they need the right care. We have backyard breeders that pay absolutely no attention to any of these things and are quite happy to let a puppy go to any home, and they have no interest. And of course, backyard breeders don't take puppies back.
An element of backyard breeding, which I don't think is talked about enough, is the impact that this has on rescues, because it cannot be ignored that at the moment in this country, we have too many dogs. And I never thought those words would leave my mouth, because how can you possibly have too many dogs? But we have dogs who are losing their lives every single day because they do their 7-day stint in council pounds And if no one claims them, they're often euthanised. And I don't think the general public are fully aware of how many dogs are being euthanised every single day. And these are healthy dogs. These aren't dogs with bite histories or reactivity issues or health issues. These are completely sound dogs who are losing their lives simply because of irresponsible breeding that has resulted in a life of trauma, really, for them. So I spoke with Elaine Barter, the founder of Arundel Dog Rescue, to talk a little bit about backyard breeding and some of the stories that she's bared witness to over the years, and the state of rescue in this country at the moment, and how we need to be changing our behaviour and changing our mindset as a society to facilitate healthy dog breeding, and also a little bit stem the flow of puppies that we've got going on at the moment in this country.
This is Ghost. Ghost is completely crippled. He was running feral that we know of for definite 14 months. The feeling is he was loose for at least 3 years, and he's completely fucked. His pelvis is totally smashed to pieces. His tail is smashed. His hind leg is smashed. He walks like this and he carries one leg up. When you watch him running in the field, if you watch any of the videos that I put up, you'll see him running in the field. You would never know there's anything wrong. He is so fast, it's unbelievable, because he's obviously got some sort of nerve damage, and the bull terriers lie on top of him. Just the fact that he's come in here with you is really good, because he's only literally just getting to the point of letting other people interact with him at all. He was really, really frightened. Flight risk, as is this one here. She's flight risk. Hence why they're here, because they've got the 2.5 acres, which is completely secure, that they can go out and run on. And so, look at you molting, mate. Look at this. No wonder this place is a shithole.
This interview that I did with Elaine is unlike any other interview I've ever conducted in my career up until this point. She is amazing. She is absolutely amazing. I think she's one of the coolest people I've ever met. And she runs a dog rescue, which is completely family run. And I arrived and I turned up to do this interview with her. And I don't know what I was expecting, but it certainly wasn't what happened, because she took me into her home and we sat down opposite each other, surrounded by, no word of a lie, probably upwards of 15 dogs. And these were dogs who were sort of end-of-life care, hospice care, very elderly dogs, dogs who would really struggle to find a home in the real world, to use Elaine's term. And so she took them in and they became the Arundel Pack, where they could live out their golden years knowing nothing other than love and 5-star treatment.
So my name's Elaine Barter. I founded Arundel Dog Rescue many years ago now. This little girl here, the little one that's had to have all her teeth removed in the orange coat, she's got 3 teeth left. She has steak cooked for breakfast. Him and Thomas, they have our own free-range eggs, which we have our chickens that lay our eggs for our dogs. And they have scrambled egg for breakfast with roast chicken. So we roast chicken every single night overnight. And then they have homemade bolognese for tea. There's been times over the years where you think, can it get any worse? Oh, Taylor, you're not helping me.
I should also say that this interview had everything going on. Because we had so many dogs, you're going to hear dogs moving around, you're going to hear snuffles, you're going to hear barking, you might even hear a little growl. You're going to hear the gate alarm going off quite literally every 5 minutes, because this is rescue. It's relentless. Elaine took about 600 phone calls in my interview because she can't afford not to, because if she doesn't, there's a potential that a dog might die. This is how serious it is. Equally, just to add to the drama that was going on, she actually had a dog whelping at the time of this interview. So she had a dog giving birth. So we were getting updates throughout the interview about how this little bitch was getting on. So please bear with us, is what I'm asking. This is raw. It's real. I'm not going to edit these things out, because I think it's important that you grasp the severity of the situation, of the state that rescue is in at the moment, and hopefully get a clearer picture of that, so we can understand the gravity of the breeding epidemic that is in this country at the moment.
Do you want to take her down to Lucy to get Lucy to have a look at her?
The puppy's moving around. Her stomach has dropped to the point that her teats are about that much off the floor.
Then I'd wait.
Yeah.
She's not barking at the moment, which is, I mean, you've come out and she's not barking, which is...
She's quite hot, so I've opened it up again, even though I'm cold in there, she's quite hot.
Motion detected at the rescue gateway.
All she wants is her lower back to be rubbed. She's just sitting there looking at me.
All I don't want to do is leave it much.
What's our latest time call?
What, for Lucy?
Yeah.
What's it now? It's 12:15.
About 12:15.
Do you want me to ask her?
I think it would be nice to know.
Hi Lucy, just a quickie. What is the latest realistically that we can bring this spaniel down should things not progress? Because she's not going classically according to plan, and she is so vast that I really do think that inertia could be a likelihood.
Her stomach's rock solid.
Yeah, I know. I don't want to rush in and I don't want to dive in and do a C-section if we're not.
No, I don't want to either. I'd love to see her deliver these.
Even going for a drive in the car might.
Yeah, it's to work before, but not with your driving. I
Bugger
do
off.
remember going around a roundabout on 2 wheels and a puppy flying out.
Yeah, it did.
That wasn't the worst puppy delivery we did, was it?
No, probably not. Trouble is with puppy deliveries, if you've got a bitch that you don't know what it was mated to, you don't know when it was mated, so you don't know whether it's overdue, underdue, you're diving in too quickly, etc. And the last experience we had of a pregnant spaniel was a hideous one, absolutely hideous. So we lost the bitch and all the puppies. She was ancient, absolutely
How old is
ancient.
she supposed to be? Sorry.
This one,
Yeah.
oh, she's young. I've looked at her. She's not old. 4, 3, 4,
Okay.
most.
She's had more than 1 litre already, hasn't she?
Yeah. Can you still see movement?
Yes.
Right, okay. Take a temperature. I think if nothing's happened by 2, we take her down and have. But I will come and have a look. For a start, you've got backyard breeders breeding types of dog which are not for your average person. They have a purpose. So we have your big Mastiff types, your big bull breed types being crossed with, for example, your husky types. The ramifications are multiple, seriously multiple. So you've got people breeding the little poodle mixes, the crossbreeds, by the hundreds, thousands, failing to recognise that these are 2 very different working breed dogs, failing to recognise the traits of the dogs, not assessing the temperament or the physical construction of the parents because they don't care. You've got colour breeding. I had somebody contact me a couple of days ago asking if we could help rehome their dog. And I said, what was it? Cockapoo. So I asked for photographs. It was Merle. So I asked the lady where she thought that the Merle had come from, as in poodles don't carry Merle and nor do Cocker Spaniels carry Merle. And she said she had questioned what it might be. Like, she paid £3,000 for it. You've got dogs being sold to people that realistically should never have dogs. You've got a society that, generalising, believe that they have a God-given right to own a dog, and it is all about ownership. It's nothing to do with sharing your life with your dog. It's to do with owning your dog, and when your dog becomes inconvenient, disposing of your dog. In many cases, these dogs are no more valued than a bloody washing machine, literally. So the problem is across the board, with all types, with all sizes, and with people not having a clue what they're doing. So the little bitch that we took in recently called Lola, that was handed into a vet's, who I have to say were amazing. She was handed in by 2 girls who said that they had found her. She had a puppy stuck in the birth canal. She had 3 dead puppies inside her. The vets did a C-section at their own cost, and then she was put through the pound system. Then she came to us, went into foster. So she had a singleton puppy. They've just literally been homed. Both of them have just gone into homes. But that was somebody obviously breeding to make money. The birthing went wrong. They didn't have the resources to do anything about it, nor would they have ever got their money back. So they dumped the dog. Had that vets not been the vets they were, that bitch would have been put to sleep mid-birthing, having been through pain, with a belly full of dead puppies.
One of the reasons that dogs can bite is because they're in pain. There are dogs that are being bred at the moment, and we can look to XL bullies, for example. If they're poorly bred dogs, being bred for very heavy musculature, these dogs can end up with really severe joint problems. We have a lot of dogs that are being bred into a life of misery and pain. These are dogs that may bite as a result of that. And these are dogs that become part of those dog bite statistics. And then those dog bite statistics go into public circulation. We can trace back to poor breeding as one of the reasons why we end up with the number of dog bites that we have now. So we've got the backyard breeders, but I have to say the other people who I think are hugely problematic are these kind of hobby breeders that just have a litter from their bitch because they think it's good for her, or they think, oh, well, I could just make a few pounds from this. They are equally problematic because they don't do health checks. They have absolutely no understanding about what it means to breed dogs. They have no real thought about where the dogs are going. And they may have had a wonderful experience with their particular dog, but they don't have the necessary education, the necessary knowledge to actually bring up a litter of puppies to the point where they're well socialized and can go to good homes. Those hobby breeders, they are not the people who are going to be taking dogs back at any time during their lives. We have a whole load of different issues out there. We've got the hardcore backyard breeders. We've also got commercial breeders. We've got puppy farmers that are breeding on a much bigger scale. Then we've got these hobby one-off breeders that I would say equally problematic. And then we've got people who are responsible breeders who are educated, will have gone through, for example, kennel club training schemes. They will have been vetted either by their local councils and by the kennel club. There are still breeders out there who are taking responsibility for their dogs. And I think it's just important to recognise that they're absolutely in the minority.
Money, 100%. That's the only reason people do it. People do not have a clue about cost. To rear puppies properly is an expensive process. So you may have seen them. We've taken in 2 Cane Corso puppies. One of them had cherry eye. The story was that it was an accidental mating, that they were going to abort them, but the PDSA wanted £300 and they didn't have £300. So they decided to go ahead with having the litter. It transpires that they've had several litters previously. So the story was bullshit, basically. She had, I can't remember whether it was 7 or 9 puppies. They sold them at 6 weeks old. So he took them to the vets and had them microchipped, couldn't afford to have them vaccinated. So they went out unvaccinated. So you are relying on those people that have just bought a Cane Corso puppy for £300 to go and vaccinate. Cane Corsos being the next breed that is going to be damned, as the XLs have, because of irresponsible breeding, irresponsible ownership. You've then got the people breeding dogs as assistance dogs and selling them for large sums of money. The dogs aren't trained. The dogs are not assistance dogs. We had a litter of puppies dumped in a cardboard box on a doorstep at 2 weeks old. They've gone to their new homes a few weeks ago.
It's interesting listening to the interviews and how Elaine reflected on breeding for colour and how that's a very in thing across numerous breeds, but it is particular within the XLs and that designer dog kind of look, and it was very sought after, which kind of plays into Iris and how stunningly beautiful she was. Who wouldn't want her puppies? She's a gold mine for that owner. And I know this through experience. Before we got BB, I was kind of looking, but not extensively looking, I wasn't certainly jumping to any conclusions, but I saw on social media, there was this particular breeder that I found on Instagram for XLs. They just had a litter. Mum and dad looked gorgeous. The puppies were of exotic colour. And I just a simple inquiry about the litter. There was nothing on pricing. So I just kind of what kind of range are we looking at for these dogs? And it was just red flag central, really. It started by saying, I think there was 10 pups in the litter and each dog was individually priced based on the colours that they had. The most expensive, the pick of the litter, I think was in the region of £5,500 and the cheapest was maybe £2,700. So needless to say, that's kind of where I ended talks with them.
Elaine spoke quite passionately about how so many dogs have now become possessions for people. And just as easily as you can acquire a dog, because I do think it is far too easy to acquire a dog in this country nowadays, you can just as easily dispose of them. And these breeders who are breeding for money, and they're breeding, as is the case in the kennel that Pete talked about, on colour for money, ultimately, they're not vetting the homes that these dogs are going to. So you're ending up with potentially poorly bred dogs who have been bred purely for a colour aesthetic, going to people who may also be buying them for the wrong reasons and maybe buying them as an accessory. Look at my big hard dog who looks a certain way, as opposed to buying it for the companionship that a responsible dog owner would. They're ending up with potential behaviour problems because they may not be genetically fulfilling that dog. They may not be providing for that dog on a holistic, emotional level, which results in so many bull breeds ending up in rescue because of these poor breeding practices. Claire was talking about the health issues that some of these dogs have. If you're breeding a dog to look like this huge bruiser that is so muscly and an absolute beast of a dog, think about the stress that's going through their joints, and it may make them more inclined to bite. Bull breeds, Mastiff types, these are hardy dogs. They are designed to power through and to push through pain, and they only really start telling you that they're in pain when it reaches a critical point. And that is where we have to recognise body language so that it doesn't result in a bite and doesn't result in an accident.
I can tell you so many examples of dogs that we've taken that have got bite histories, and you hear the context of that bite history and you just think, well, yeah, this is why people need education about dogs and how to bring dogs up. It's just appalling, it really is. When we did this study back in 2021, the public perceptions of dangerous dogs, we gave them different contexts and we said, could a dog bite in this particular context? And it was all the usual ones: dogs asleep, somebody delivering post at the door, when hugging the dog. The majority of people said, yes, a dog can potentially bite in that particular scenario. And then we asked them, would your dog bite in that scenario? And across the board, they said no. And this just shows, even if people know that these are situations in which a dog might bite, they have this unwavering sense that it would be anybody else's dog would do it, but not their dog. This is the thing that we need to get over. They're not little people in fluffy clothes, they're dogs. Part of the really big problem that we have in this country right now is that people think they know what their dog is saying to them, and they don't. They do not understand dog body language. They have absolutely no idea when dogs are indicating that they're feeling stressed or they're uncomfortable or they're not happy with the situation that they're in. The number of horrendous videos that I see where there's a small child running up and hugging a dog, and that dog is lip licking and yawning and turning their head away or quickly licking the child. This is not the dog kissing the child and having a really great time. This is a dog saying, I'm really uncomfortable. I do not want this to be happening. Please stop this right now. And I'm just giving you one example there because these are the examples that really set my teeth on edge, because I'm so terrified for the child and for the dog, because there's a point where that dog is going to say, I've told you 20 times, I really don't like this. Now I have to bite to say, please get away from me or please back off. And then people say, oh, they bit with no warning.
In the pound kennels, in that situation, they're frightened. They've been abandoned. They've been dumped. They're showing fear reactivity. So they're being deemed as dog aggressives. They're just frightened. It's the noise. It's the environment. Those dogs don't get out because there aren't the spaces. But these dogs are coming in thick and fast. Dogs with bite histories because they're frightened. Dogs that have been abused by children, climbed all over by children. The world of dog rescue's changed out of all recognition. These days we are all, by turning dogs down, signing death warrants. And we're turning dogs down because we have not got the physical capacity to take them. We don't have the space, we don't have the facilities, we certainly don't have the money. Bearing in mind this is a small rescue, the vet bill last month was just under £9,000. And that's in the main medical treatment for dogs that have been dumped. As far as I'm concerned, the only way to even begin to address this is to have licensing brought back. And licensing needs to be at a cost, and it should be tested. There should be, much the same as with the driving test, there should be an online course and questionnaire for dog ownership. I know means testing is a very controversial subject, but if you can't afford to keep a dog, you shouldn't have one. If you can't afford vet fees or insurance, don't get a dog. The lack of commitment to training is unbelievable. The lack of commitment to exercise is unbelievable. The lack of desire to put any effort in. You cannot demand and dictate. It doesn't matter whether it's a puppy that you buy or a rescue dog. It makes no difference. If you're not going to put the time and the effort in to helping that dog, then don't get one. Bull breeds will always be harder because of the public perception of them and because of the irresponsible ownership of some of them. But all of that goes back to the fact that people should be researching what they're getting, and breeders should be held responsible for the dogs that they're breeding. Breeders should legally be required to take full responsibility for all dogs that they breed and sell, should those homes not work out. If those people were legally responsible for having to take back a dog they bred without exception, whether they had to take responsibility for putting that dog to sleep or rehoming it themselves, if that was law, you would cut back on the breeding hugely. Equally, if the law said that you couldn't sell your puppy before 12 weeks old and that it had to be fully vaccinated and microchipped with dual registration, you would cut back significantly on some of these problems. Are we in a situation of no return at the moment? Yeah, 100%.
I mean, we're in a real mess. Dog culture is in a huge mess at the moment. We've got rescues overflowing. I think people are not fully aware of the number of dogs who are being euthanized every single day now in this country. Dog pounds are full, and after 7 days, the dogs are euthanized. People are not realizing that we're at this critical moment, and have been actually for a long time. And yet we still have these crazy trends, where we've gone from Frenchies, we're on Dackies at the moment, aren't we? Dachshunds seem to be the breed of choice right now. We're in a real mess at the moment. We need some huge changes to happen. If we genuinely care about dogs, and we're supposed to be this nation that loves dogs, if that's truly the case, then we need to make some fairly huge changes.
Iris had been made to look as intimidating as possible, so she'd had her ears cropped really quite badly. Cropping is obviously an illegal practice in this country, and judging by the quality of the crop that she had, it would suggest that it had occurred illegally in this country and not that she'd been a foreign import where it had been done in sanitary conditions by a professional. And as a result, she had real problems with her ears. She had constant ear infections which were causing her pain and discomfort, and she was always on some sort of medical treatment for that. And all of these elements of being in pain because of how she'd been bred and how she'd been treated through these poor breeding practices, if she'd been any other dog, could well have resulted in a bite, could have resulted in reactivity and perceived aggression. We're very fortunate that Iris was pretty bomb-proof in that respect, and she was the biggest love bug in the world. But that's not the case for a lot of these dogs when they're in constant pain. These ear infections were likely going to be an issue that Iris was going to suffer with for probably the duration of her life because she'd been subjected to that mutilation as a puppy. And that was something which potential owners weren't prepared to take on. So on top of her being now a banned breed and all that uncertainty which came with that, she looked scary purely because of human intervention, and also she came with a health problem. So actually, she was in a real mess, and the likelihood of us finding a responsible home seemed impossible at times. So it begs the question, what on earth happened to Iris?
As we've alluded to, it was a really stressful situation after the ban came in, trying to find her forever home. And it wasn't until 4 hours before the ban officially came into play that she was thankfully adopted and taken home, and she is now in her forever home. So it was a happy ending. It did work out in the end. It was just, as I said, a very stressful procedure in order to make that happen, really.
And it didn't need to be like that. There was no reason for those events to unfold in the way that they did. And we were so fortunate that at the 11th hour, quite literally, we found a home which was suitable and responsible and loving and caring and was going to give Iris that continued guidance and that continued support to live her happiest life under these new restrictions that she was being subjected to through the ban. But oh my word, it was tense and really scary and really scary because there was a high likelihood that Iris was going to lose her life on the 1st of January 2024 because lots of rescues took the stance that a life in rescue was no life. And the kind of thing to do would be to put them to sleep because, of course, that was one of the restrictions, that even rescues couldn't rehome these dogs. They weren't to change hands in any capacity after the ban came into place, hence why so many rescues decided that the route they were going to take was euthanasia. So it was a happy ending, thank goodness, and she is living her best life. So I'm so happy it worked out for her and it was all right.
The take-home points from this episode are, for those of you who are wanting to purchase a dog, or you're new to the dog world, even if you're not, I suppose, actually, or you're thinking of adding to your family, I think the importance is build a relationship with your breeder. Don't rush into it. Do your research. And it's a two-way conversation. You should go to your breeder with questions about the litter, about the parents. Do they test temperament of mum and dad? Have they had the vet look them over for their physical features? Is there anything that's of risk that could potentially be passed on to the litter? But then equally, they should be asking you questions. They should want to know where their dog is ending up. Is it going to provide a happy, fulfilled life for the dog that they've produced? Do they want to keep in touch? I think that's a big thing if breeders want to keep in touch and have regular updates. But then second to that as well, we see a lot of dogs that are unfortunately at rescue, as Elaine's alluded to, in the current climate of her little rescue that she runs and how overwhelmed she is with dogs constantly. Maybe just have a thought of, actually, we're going to rescue a dog. Maybe do a bit of volunteering, spend some time with the dogs, and you might meet your little buddy there.
Also, in the case of Elaine's rescue, Aaron Dawn, she runs quite an extensive foster network. That is largely how she survives because she doesn't have the physical kennel space to house so many dogs that are on her roster. So if you're not completely set on the idea of being a dog owner full time, maybe that's an option as well. Reach out to your local kennels in particular, as opposed to the sort of larger kennels, and see what sort of fostering opportunities they've got. They're in constant need of getting dogs into homes, whether that be on a permanent basis through adoption or a temporary fostering basis. So please, please, please do explore that option because it's so rewarding and it's just fabulous.
And just final point from me, I think, on that take-home message is do your research behind your breeds. Pick a breed that suits your lifestyle and what you can provide that you'll both benefit from.
This is the Canine Justice Chronicles. I'm Ruth Holroyd.
And I'm Peter O'Brien.
Thank you very much to Professor Claire Parkinson for providing invaluable context for this episode. And also an enormous thank you to Elaine Barter from Aaron Dawn Dog Rescue. Responsible dog ownership starts with you because small changes in our mindset leads to big changes in their world. Let's be the owners that our dogs deserve.